Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day, and the families demanding answers. We reveal the shocking evidence as it was uncovered by investigators in their quest for justice. Tonight, a case that could have happened to anyone. Imagine you're out with some of your best friends. You're having a great time. Then, all of a sudden, you see a person being bullied by someone else. You get a knot in the pit of your stomach. You want to say something, do something, but would you?
The bouncers threw him out. He was screaming at them, calling them these racial names.
Lukas was like, hey, like, shut up, don't say that kind of stuff.
There's like 30 guys coming after him. He was legitimately scared.
And she was just like, get to the hospital right now, Lukas has been stabbed.
And now, here's Nancy Hixt with the final homecoming of Lukas Strasser-Hird.
From the moment he was born, Lukas Strasser-Hird had a natural ability to overcome whatever challenges life threw his way. He excelled at everything he put his mind to, from sports to academics to music.
D, D, E, E.
Music came easily to Lukas. He played by ear.
See? That's it, dude.
By the time he was a teenager, he was playing his favorite songs without any sheet music.
He was always naturally smart. Like, he could always manage pretty like respectable grades without even like opening a textbook.
Ramsey Sharawi first met Lukas in elementary school, and by high school, they were best friends.
I'd slept at his house more times than I can remember. Like, his mom is pretty much like my mom at a certain point.
Lukas split his time between his parents' homes, his mom's, Audrey Strasser, and his dad's, Dale Hird. At Dale's house, Lukas had a little shadow who loved to follow him around.
A lot of the times, I remember just watching him and what he would do, and sometimes like mimicking what he did and try to talk like him. I always looked up to him, and he was always like my hero.
Lukas was 9 years old when his half-sister Julia was born. Unlike a lot of sibling relationships, Lukas never tired of Julia's company.
He was like so chill with me, and he never got mad at me. He always played with me, and he didn't care that much if I just wandered into his room and sat with him while he played like games on his Xbox or on his computer, and then I'd always want to play with him, but I had no idea how, and he just wanted to show me things, and he wanted to teach me how to do things.
Family and friends were everything to Lukas, so when opportunity called, he jumped at the chance to spend a year with his grandfather in South America.
He got an offer from his grandpa to come, you know, his grandpa will pay his way down there, and he can live in his nice big house with a pool and go to the American International School in Bolivia there for a year.
As much as Lukas enjoyed his time in South America, he was eager to return home to Calgary and was already making plans for his future with some of his closest friends.
He was pretty excited to come back. He would always message me. It was funny. I don't know why he always came to me about it, but he was just like so invested in like Bitcoin and all these like stock trading, and me and him would always have these talks about it. And he was always just like, man, I gotta invest in this Bitcoin stuff. And it would have been crazy because like at that time it was only worth like maybe like $100. So if he had done it, he would have been a millionaire. That's just how far, like, he was a smart guy and he was ahead of things. So.
On November 22nd, 2013, Lukas arrived home and spent the entire day with friends. Lukas told them he had finally decided on a career path after graduation. He wanted to become a doctor.
Like, his life goal was to help people, and I think that's really big, and he wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to be the best doctor he could have been so that he could save as many lives as he could have.
That night, to celebrate Lucas's homecoming, they went to a few bars in downtown Calgary and ended up at Vinyl nightclub.
Everything was perfect. Like, it was a really good time. Like, everybody was getting along. Like, the music was good, and those guys were having a good time at the bar, drinking and coming to the dance floor.
It was last call when the evening took a shocking turn.
This guy called some, I think it was a bouncer. I don't know exactly who it was, but he called somebody some profanity, some kind of profanity. And then Lucas was like, hey, like, shut up, don't say that kind of stuff to like strangers, I guess.
It wasn't out of character for Lucas to take a stand for what was right. The fact Lucas had just arrived home from a Spanish-speaking country fueled his disgust when he heard the guy yelling racial slurs at the bouncer.
What he did was not surprising to me at all. That's why, like I said, I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. I was like, oh, he's just telling this kid to shut up. Like, we're just gonna go home in like 20 minutes anyway. Like, it's not a big deal.
It soon became clear that guy wasn't open to criticism. He pushed Lucas hard, and soon Lucas found himself surrounded, swarmed by a group of guys. He tried to leave and backed away down the sidewalk, but the group went after him again. Finally, he got free and was taken inside the club by a bouncer.
They said that they were going to take him inside to sort of like diffuse the situation. But at that point, our ride had showed up and he was like right in front of the door. So we figured, okay, like, we'll drive to the back and find him, right?
Inside the bar, Lucas found Bryce.
And he seemed like legitimately scared that he was gonna get jumped again and that there's like 30 guys coming after him. I talked to the bouncer and told him, like, hey, this is our friend, like, can you let us come with him? And they said, okay, just come with me to the back. And so we had a minute at the back, not very long, and I was telling Lucas, like, hey man, we're just gonna go to the alley and we're just gonna get to my car. We'll get out as soon as possible, go out like the fastest way out of the alley so that like they can't, like, if they're gonna jump us, it's gonna be the most public. Like, we wanted to like either get to my car or like a busier place where that nobody would do anything crazy like that. The bouncers were kind of just hurrying us out the back, like, you guys gotta go. Like, they didn't really give us an option to stay in the club.
Bryce's car was parked right across the street from the bar, so it didn't seem like it would be too hard to make a quick and safe getaway.
When we went out the doors, we had sat in the alley for maybe a minute talking about which way would be the better way, and then I told him if it made him feel better, I would switch my shirt with him just so they wouldn't know it was him. Like, as soon as we came out of the alley, they just said, there he is, there he is, and then they all just chased after him. It was crazy, like, it didn't almost like feel real because it was just so sudden. We were like panicking and we didn't know what was going on, and we didn't realize that all that was happening at the same time, and they're attacking him.
Lucas was swarmed again.
Between like 10 to 15, I don't know an exact number. It was just like so overwhelming at the time. I couldn't keep a head count. He was begging for help, like begging them to stop, and he was saying, like, he said, like, you're killing me, like, please stop, I'm dying, and stuff like that. And they just kept yelling at him. They were just saying, like, you messed with the wrong guys, you messed with my friend, this is what you get, stuff like that. Like, they're just on some revenge plot of something that was so little in the front.
Bryce knew his friend was critically injured and called 911. He was one of several witnesses who called for help, including this Good Samaritan.
Guys is still here trying to him up, and he is bleeding profusely.
All right. Is he completely alert?
No, he is not alert.
Okay, now is the assailant still nearby? Is the person who did this to him still nearby?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
A whole group of them.
At the same time these calls were being made, Lucas's attackers came back and swarmed him one more time.
He got to the point, like, his face was just like almost reconstructed, almost like his eyes were closed shut, and like I don't know, like, my mind kind of has tried taking that out of my head, so it's hard to remember that. I just remember that you just could barely recognize him, and then like his shirt was completely red from all the blood, and he wasn't Lucas anymore.
Police were close by. It turned out they had responded after the initial fight happened out front. While Lucas was being brutally attacked in the back alley, they were investigating in front of the club.
It's crazy to think about how they were so close, but so far at the same time. And that's when I noticed he was covered in blood, so that's when I found out like he had been stabbed.
To give you an idea of just how fast this barbaric attack happened, it was all over before Ramsey and his buddy could pull the vehicle around the block.
We came back to the same mouth of the alley that was on the closest end of the street to the bar. And we had already seen him being mobbed by like probably 10 people at least. And then by the time I had jumped out of the car and ran up, everybody had taken off, and then that's when the ambulance and the police showed up.
At that point, Ramsey had no idea what had happened to his best friend.
It didn't click in my head what was happening, like I said, because I never imagined that it would go that far. So when I saw everybody at the alley, I was kind of like, oh, what happened? And then as I got closer, I figured out what happened. I never thought that would happen to somebody I knew. I don't think anybody does.
Lucas was rushed to hospital.
Coming up after the break, Lukas Strasser-Hird had dreams of becoming a doctor, specifically a trauma surgeon. Instead, he laid on an operating table as a trauma surgeon worked to try and save his life. As Dale Hird went to bed the night of November 22nd, 2013, all was good in his world. He was excited to see his son, and they planned to decorate the Christmas tree as a family the following day. Instead, his whole world would soon fall apart. We now return to Nancy Hixt and the final homecoming of Lukas Strasser-Hird.
Well, I remember I went to bed, and I'm an IT guy, so I tend to turn my phone off notifications and stuff at night, because it sometimes can just bug you for no reason. And so my ringer turned off or whatever, and I got up at about 5:30 in the morning, I believe, to go to the washroom. And I looked at my phone, and there was like 9 missed calls on my phone. And I looked, and it was a number I'd never even seen before. So I thought, my very first thought is, oh, Lucas had too much to drink and he needed a ride home or something, and I hope that he's got a ride home. You know, that was my first thought. So I actually went upstairs, went to the washroom. I was making a coffee, and the phone rang, and it was Audrey. And she was screaming, and she was just like, get to the hospital right now, Lucas has been stabbed. And I was like, what? And she said, Lucas has been stabbed. He's been stabbed 3 times, and go there and be with him. Go there and be with him. And it's just the biggest shock you'd ever hear. Like, I was half asleep, and just bang, hits you like a hammer. And so I went upstairs. I started just screaming. I was totally just screaming. I couldn't believe it. Lucas has been stabbed. Lucas has been stabbed.
Lucas's mother, Audrey, was out of town in northern Alberta for work. She had a 6-hour drive back to Calgary to see him. Dale called his mother, Lucas's grandmother. She picked him up, and they went to the hospital together. And
as soon as I walked in, I'll never forget, my very first thought was like a relief. It was like, that's not him. That's not my son. This guy's face is swollen up like this, and his neck's all swollen. I thought it wasn't him at first.
That feeling of relief was quickly replaced by complete devastation, a feeling that's consumed Dale ever since.
Until I grabbed his hand, and I felt his hand. It's exactly his hand, and I smelt his hair, and I knew it was him. Right then and there.
Julia was only 9 years old when she was taken into that hospital room to see her big brother.
I think the one thing that really sticks, and you know, I still like think about it daily, is seeing him and walking into his hospital room and just being like, wrong room, this isn't it. And like, it's just black and blue. I couldn't tell, but then I saw his hands were like untouched. They looked like his hands, and I just remember I noticed his hair and it smelled like his hair, and then I saw his eyes, they were like partly open, and I knew they were his, and it was just, oh my gosh, like this is not real. I'm pretty sure I was screaming, but I didn't know, like I was just, yeah, that was like easily the craziest day of my life.
Lukas was clinging to life, and as Dale and Julia held his hands, they both felt a squeeze. He knew they were there by his side. And then, in an instant, Lukas took a turn for the worse.
I heard someone say that his blood pressure had dropped to 40/20. And then they ushered us into the side room, and that's where this one doctor was trying to talk to us about if he hadn't been stabbed in the heart, if he had been this, if it had been that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then all of a sudden this other doctor there, he interrupted this other doctor and he said, your son's gonna die in 5 minutes. And right then and there, I jumped up and I ran to the room, and there he was, and I immediately grabbed his hand, and I grabbed him, and I was screaming into his ear, trying to beg him just to keep going, come on, one more pump, come on, I'll never let this happen to you again, I'll never not, like I was just telling him how I was gonna always protect him forever, and this will never happen to him again. And I was praying, and I was down, and then I remember Julia, my mom, people were there, but I was I can barely remember. I just remember freaking out about it. And then a doctor came in, or a nurse came in, and started turning off stuff, turning off the instruments. And I got so mad. It's, don't give up on him, don't give up on him. And then I was just down on my hands and knees, just praying and screaming into his ear to keep going, keep going. Your mom isn't here yet. You please just try to stay, Lukas, so your mom can say goodbye. And then another doctor came in and just looked me right in the eye and said, your son's passed away. And it just went all quiet. And then it's a little blurry after that.
Lukas was gone.
It's really hard. It's something you just can't let go of. It gets easier to handle over time, but having him, having his blood on my hands, and watching them pull the plug while I'm sitting there holding his hand, and you're just you didn't have time. It's just not, it wasn't fair.
In that instant, everything changed.
Coming up, as Lukas's family prepare to lay him to rest, police were tracking down his killers. It should have been the happiest time of year, filled with Christmas shopping and time with family and friends. Instead, Lukas's loved ones planned his funeral. And now we return to Nancy Hixt and the final homecoming of Lukas Strasser-Hird.
Hundreds of people filled the church pews. The sadness was crushing. They were grieving the life of a young man who should never have been taken from them. His death, incomprehensible.
I'm glad to see that you're all here to commemorate the life of my best friend and my brother. I met Lukas when we were 11.
Ramsey read a special tribute. Lukas's mother wrapped her arms around him and helped him find the strength to continue.
I met Lukas when we were 11. By the time we were 14, I spent almost every day with him. He taught me so much. He taught me not to care what other people thought of myself. He taught me to want to enjoy my life and make the most of it.
And then, with her father by her side, it was Lukas's little sister's turn.
You are the most amazing brother a girl could ever wish for. I'm giving you this medal because I remember when I told you I'd got my second soccer medal, you said, "Congrats, I love you," and there are no words to express how proud I am of you. I started to tear up. Your girlfriend has been talking to me a lot, and she feels the same way as I do. She said she loved how cheesy you were and how much she loved your cheesy compliments.
Julia was doing exactly what her big brother would have wanted her to. She was focusing on the good times, the joy Lukas brought to their lives.
You never let me drink milk out of the carton, even though boys are usually the ones who do it.
At 9 years old, this little angel transformed the room. She took them from mourning to celebrating her brother's life.
He always motivated everyone. He always tried to help everyone too. He said, "If I can do it, you can too." His smile is printed on my soul, and I hope the same for you.
The final words were spoken by Lukas's mother, Audrey Strasser.
There's so many beautiful memories we have of him and joyous occasions that we can't put on a piece of paper. We will carry him in our heart for always and always and always.
Though I've messaged back and forth with Audrey on many occasions, this was one of the only times she ever spoke publicly about Lukas. She's since moved to South America, her heart forever broken by the loss of her son.
There was not a day in my life that I did not speak with my son that he did not tell me how much he loved me. I was so blessed with such a beautiful child.
It was so hard to comprehend how this happened to Lukas, and over what? All he did was defend a stranger. Police had their work cut out for them. With so many involved in the attack, it was a daunting task. To make matters worse, the savage swarming was not captured on surveillance video. Witness accounts would become key evidence in this case.
I was able to remember things so well because I was sober, and I don't think any of my memories were affected because of drinking or anything like that.
With Bryce's help, along with other witnesses, homicide detectives made arrests.
Murder charges have now been laid against 2 young men in connection with a deadly weekend attack. What began as a senseless argument outside a downtown bar has ended 1 young life and forever changed 2 others. Nancy Hixt reports.
2 young men are now behind bars in remand. 19-year-old Franz Cabrera is charged with second-degree murder. 18-year-old Nathan Gervais is charged with first-degree murder.
A few days later, Josh Pook was charged with second-degree murder. Nearly 3 weeks later, a 4th man, Asmer Schlaw, was arrested and charged. And then, more than a month later, a 5th man, Jordan Liao, was charged with second-degree murder. This would be the last murder charge laid in this case. Within days of that final arrest, Dale was thrown onto an emotional roller coaster that would continue for years. One by one, each of the men accused of murder in the case was granted bail. Even the man who faced the most serious charge of first-degree murder, Nathan Gervais, was let out of custody.
With his accused killers out on bail, Lukas's family feared there would never be justice. The shocking twist this case would take after the break. the wheels of justice move slowly, and it would be 2.5 long years after Lukas died before his accused killers would stand trial. But before that could happen, yet another blow. We now return to Nancy Hixt and the final homecoming of Lukas Strasser-Hird.
On the eve of the trial, Nathan Gervais, the man accused of the most serious offense of first-degree murder, skipped bail.
But Nathan taking off, like right before, like, what does he have to lose, right? First-degree murderer, you know, he's gonna get 25 years. He's not gonna get anything added to it, right? And it's just unreal, he took off.
The court proceedings would continue without Gervais. On May 4th, 2016, Asmer Schla, Franz Cabrera, Josh Pook, and Jordan Liao all stood trial accused of second-degree murder. The prosecution alleged the violent attack all started with a misplaced jacket at the club's coat check. Asmer Schla was captured on surveillance video. He became enraged when he couldn't immediately get his coat back.
And so the bouncers threw him out, and then when the bouncers were throwing him out, he was screaming at them too, calling them these racial names. And that's when Lukas was standing there as a bystander, just outside, minding his own business. And he said to Asmer, "Enough with the racial names," or something like that. And then Asmer turned to him and attacked him, and all his friends attacked him. Like, it's on video.
Out front of the club, Asmer Schla violently pushed Lukas. Then his friends joined in. Lukas defended himself and struck Schla in the face. The group pinned Lukas against a wall. Bouncers came to his rescue and took him inside the nightclub. Minutes later, Lukas and his friends were let out the back door. They had no idea that Asmer Schla and his friends were waiting for Lukas in the alley.
Like, he was running from the scene and he had his whole shoe was soaked with my son's blood. So he was one of the guys, like when we talk about Lukas being stabbed, he didn't stab him. He's the one that kicked his teeth out of his head onto the ground.
Two of the accused testified in their own defense, including Asmer Schla. He denied any involvement in the attack. The evidence suggested otherwise, beginning with the animosity he held towards Lukas for what happened out front of the nightclub. And then there was the shoe evidence. Asmer Schla and Nathan Gervais were both really good soccer players. They played at the highest level of competitive youth soccer in Calgary. There are photos of the shoes Schla wore the night of Lukas's attack. The top of his right shoe, his instep, is blood-stained. Schla maintained the blood was his own, but his story also changed a few times. When he was arrested, he told police they wouldn't find Lukas's blood on his shoes at all. Not even a fleck, is what he said. During the trial, he testified he got a bloody nose from the original altercation out front of the club. He said that's what caused the stain on his shoes. He also said it was possible he stepped in some of Lukas's blood when he was briefly in the alley, but maintained he didn't participate in the attack. Forensic testing revealed the blood on Schla's right shoe was Lukas's. His DNA was also found on Schla's left shoe.
And it was exactly where they used to, where a soccer player kicks a soccer ball. This guy was a soccer player, you know, and so the testimony was that they were kicking my son's head like a soccer ball. They were taking turns when he was on the ground dying.
Franz Cabrera was close friends with Schla. His defense lawyer didn't deny Cabrera's involvement in the attack, but tried to minimize the impact of his actions. As with Schla, the evidence told another story. One witness identified Cabrera as someone who stomped Lukas in the face. Cabrera's car keys were found at the scene. Jurors heard Cabrera stabbed Lukas with those keys. His DNA was on them. And in the hours that followed the swarming, Cabrera sent several damning texts to Nathan Gervais. One read, "Bro, I stabbed someone for asthma and he got arrested." Then, "I think I killed him. I'm hiding in an alley." Josh Pook was identified as one of the attackers. Court heard he braced himself with one hand on a wall as he kicked Lukas in the face, along with 6 to 8 other guys. Pook testified in his own defense and admitted to participating in the attack, but said he kicked Lukas no more than 4 times before he left the scene. After 6 weeks of evidence, it took jurors several days to reach their verdicts.
After the break, the jury's decision. But the emotional roller coaster for Lukas's family and friends was far from over. It took several days for the jury to reach verdicts in the case. But Lukas's family could never have predicted what would happen next. We now return to Nancy Hixt for the conclusion of the final homecoming of Lukas Strasser-Hird.
A small measure of relief tonight for the family of a Calgary teen who was swarmed and beaten to death. A jury has convicted 3 of the 4 men in the killing of Lukas Strasser-Hird. One of the accused did walk free. Nancy Hixt reports.
For the first time since the brutal murder of his son more than 2.5 years ago, the father of Lukas Strasser-Hird left court feeling some peace.
I was gonna start clapping in there.
After nearly 3 days of deliberations, the jury came back Thursday morning with 4 verdicts for the men charged in the swarming death of the 18-year-old. Asmar Schlaw is guilty of second-degree murder. Franz Cabrera also guilty of second-degree murder. Josh Pook was found not guilty of second-degree murder, but guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. And Jordan Liao has been found not guilty and walked out of court a free man. In January 2017, more than 3 years after Lukas's death, Franz Cabrera and Asmar Schlaw were sentenced to life in prison. Josh Pook, who was convicted of the lesser charge of manslaughter, was sentenced to 7 years in prison, minus credit for time served. That still wasn't the end for Lukas's family. Even after being handed a life sentence, Asmar Schlaw kept applying for bail, pending his appeal being heard. And Nathan Gervais was still on the run. By then, he had been gone for more than a year. But the Calgary police homicide detectives never gave up.
The father of a Calgary murder victim is praising police for tracking down an accused killer on the run. Nathan Gervais was returned to Canada from Vietnam on Friday.
And as Nancy Hixt reports, the victim's family now wants anyone who helped them flee Calgary to be charged.
We now know Nathan Gervais fled to Vietnam, where nearly 2 years later, Calgary police tracked him down.
It was a big relief for us. They've never quit. They never gave up.
Officials from the Vietnamese embassy confirmed they helped facilitate Gervais being brought back to Canada by police last Friday. He's expected to be flown back to Calgary later this week. Dale Hird wants a full investigation done into Gervais' disappearance.
It would have been simple right from the start if he wasn't let out on bail. Like, the decision to let him out on bail cost 20 months of full-time work for the Calgary police, and that's just ridiculous.
Global News discovered Gervais was arrested by police in Vietnam several months earlier for being in the country with a fraudulent passport. Officials then reached out to police in Calgary.
In January, we were advised by the Ministry of Public Security in Vietnam that Gervais was to be deported back to Canada.
Dale Hird felt like he could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. But it was short-lived. Days after learning Gervais had been caught, another blow.
Asmar Schlaw, convicted murderer, gets let out on bail a week before Christmas, destroyed our family's Christmas, destroyed really my faith in anything. He's convicted. He's not innocent. There's no presumption of innocence, there's nothing.
Schlaw was released on $50,000 cash bail. He was under house arrest, except to go to school or work.
I think the court system is very frustrating, and I know it's really hard to change things, but I think if enough people were to say something about at least murderers not being able to get bail while they're sentenced and convicted, I think that would be a really big change in the court system.
More than 5 years after Lukas was killed, Nathan Gervais finally stood trial for first-degree murder. Once again, Lukas's loved ones had to relive the horrific details of his brutal and savage death.
Because it was a few years after, that's when I started to be more mentally clear and was rebounding myself, and I was feeling better, and then going through the court and hearing all these things again and having to remember every image and everything. My mind was trying to get it out, but I had to reach back in and grab all those memories that I didn't want to have, but I knew I had to do it for Lukas and his family.
Surveillance video showed Gervais left the bar to get a knife from his car, then returned to the club. He stalked Lukas's movements through the front window. Then, when he saw Lukas was let out the back, he was seen running around to the alley to intercept him. Justice William Tilleman found Gervais guilty of first-degree murder. He called his actions predatory and calculated. Tilleman found Gervais physically restrained and forcibly confined Lukas because he was pinned between a dumpster, the wall, and the ground as he was stabbed. It was impossible for him to escape. Gervais was given an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. But it still wasn't over. In November of 2019, 6 years after Lukas was killed, the Supreme Court of Canada heard the appeals of Asmer Schlaw and Franz Cabrera. Gavin Walsh, Cabrera's defense lawyer, presented his argument first.
Lukas Strasser-Hird would have died whether or not Franz Cabrera ever set foot in that alley.
Well, we don't know that. That was the evidence of one of the witnesses.
The fatal injuries, Justice Brown, were inflicted by Nathan Gervais with a folding knife that he got from his car before Franz Cabrera ever arrived in that alley.
What if the death was hastened by the additional attack?
And then it was Balfour Durr's turn to argue Asmer Schlaw's case.
I guess this was a terrible case. A young man is beset upon in the back alley. This is nowhere near a fair fight. We have a large group, a number of people attacking him. One of these people, Gervais, brings a knife to this fist fight, stabs him to death.
But he didn't drop down dead on the spot, did he? It's not like one blow straight to the heart, he hits the ground, it's over. It didn't happen like that, did it?
What I'm doing is I'm trying to show you that even when you look at the whole of this evidence, it was so weak as to be virtually useless. I mean,
the blood on the running shoes is really quite strong evidence, if the jury chose to see it as they were entitled to see it, that it didn't happen from a nosebleed. It happened from brutal kicking and blood getting all over the shoe. Okay. And so, but that goes to identification too, by the way.
At the Supreme Court, each side is allowed to present its argument for 30 minutes. After Durr finished, court took a recess. What happened next is incredibly rare.
The court, la cour.
It won't be necessary to hear from the Crown. We all wanted to let counsel know for Mr. Cabrera and Mr. Schlaw that the representations you made, both in your factums and orally, could not have been better. And we're not persuaded.
We agree with the majority of the Court of Appeal that the charge to the jury does not disclose reviewable error and that the jury's verdicts were not unreasonable.
And that was it. Asmer Schlaw and Franz Cabrera stand convicted of the second-degree murder of Lukas Strasser-Hird. It's hard to describe just how big this was for Lukas's father. For a brief moment, the pain that's filled his eyes for years was replaced with relief.
It's been hell. Like, my life is hell, and today is a good day.
Having Schla held accountable for Lukas's death has always been important to Dale. It was Schla who made the racist comments that night, the comments that spurred Lukas to speak out in the first place.
My son stood up to this asthma guy. He couldn't stand it. He was humiliated. And you can even see him on video talking to the guys that eventually attacked my son. And they went around back and attacked him and killed him. Well, as soon as I heard the judge say that Crown doesn't need to speak, I just got chills. And, and I turn and look over at their side and I see the guy crying over there. So I'm happy with that. Like, I'm sure my son was crying when he was kicking him in the face, when he was bleeding to death on the ground. So
Schla remained out on bail until he returned to Calgary and finally went to prison.
We have no comment. We have no comment.
No comment.
Guys,
move,
come on.
move, put a hand on
Civil
it.
fight.
Do you have
any hearts? Stop.
Lukas's friends who were there that night will never be the same. Each of his loved ones has found their own way of coping with this senseless crime.
I've learned, I guess, not how to deal with it, but like how to deal with it better.
Probably the hardest year of my life was just trying to get that out of my head. Like, I had nightmares for months playing the same thing over in my head non-stop. Then I started having like dreams of what if Lukas was fine and he made it transition more into positive things, but it was still really hard to battle, and I battled with depression for a while. And I think a lot of us did.
The pain will never end for Lukas's family and friends. After the appeals stop, there will be parole hearings to attend.
Probably one of the hardest things about all this is I can't remember the last time I saw my dad really smile. And it's just, I don't know how he does it sometimes. Like, just like everything that he's gone to, like every court, he just constantly deals with this and people harassing him online. Like, it's not fair, and all while this is going on, he's still my dad, and he still knows how to crack a joke, and I don't know, it's just like seeing how much it's changed him and how it's made him so anxious, and it's just, I just wish I could do something to take it away.
To make matters worse, they all live with the fact that some of the men who attacked Lukas have never and will never be held accountable.
Carol, my brother's playing piano.
That pig is cool, I think.
Witnesses say more than a dozen people were involved in the swarming attack of Lukas Strasser-Hird. Only 4 were held accountable for their involvement in the case. Lukas's family and friends had hoped they would all face justice. Instead, police focused on the people who the prosecution believed could face a reasonable likelihood of conviction. That means there are times when Lukas's loved ones cross paths with some of his attackers who remain free. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
For more on this story and other high-profile Canadian cases, check out Crime Beat Podcast. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on CuriousCast.ca.